Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you for coming back to listen to more of Queen Andraya. Today we are on Chapter 26. Here we go. Chapter 26. Arrest This Man. The sunshine shone down in a long stream of light in the center of the sitting room, bringing an uncomfortable heat to the large space. Andraya sat with her legs crossed in a red velvet chair, bobbing one anxious leg up and down. Prince Stefan paced slowly in front of her. Benjamin stood still in the corner, but tapped his thumbs together over and over. Large footsteps sounded down the hallway and grew closer until they reached the Queen. "Your carriage is ready for you, Your Majesty," said the butler. The Queen stood. "Thank you, Alvin. Are you positive the army commander will get my message before I arrive at the port?" "Indeed, madam," the butler assured her. "He will meet you a few miles north of it." "And you still cannot find Caleen?" "Regretfully, no. I have called on every footman and maid I can possibly think of to search for her," Alvin replied. "Benjamin," said the Queen, "your only duty while I am out is to find my lady-in-waiting. I am getting worried," she admitted. "I will not rest until I find her, my queen," Benjamin promised with a bow. "Are you ready to embark, Your Highness?" Andraya said to Stefan, who had finally stopped pacing. "Whenever you are." The Queen hooked her elbow with his, her heart skipping a beat as she did so. She wanted to lean into the prince, but she kept herself upright as they walked through the vast entrance hall. Her lower-heeled shoes did not echo as loudly off the high-vaulted ceilings as they normally did. "Your Majesty," said a deep voice behind them. Andraya turned and saw the Chancellor standing tall with his hands inside the pockets of his sleek black pants. A neutral expression replaced his usual scowl. "Yes, Chancellor? What is this? The prince was just released from the dungeon and you are already taking him on a pleasure ride?" "On the contrary, sir, our destination will be anything but pleasant, I assure you." "And where might that be?" Dolian asked, sauntering his way over to them. "To the Griffin Port," Andraya said simply. "For what purpose? To verify my shipments?" "There is no need for that. I have had a change of heart." Andraya cocked her head. "Meaning?" "Meaning I will show you my shipment logs if you wish." Then he raised a hand. "But only so you can confirm that I am exceptional with my work, and that it does not merit supervision." "Well, on any other day, I would see them immediately. But right now I must get going. I have no time to lose." "What is your urgency? And please do not tell me it is to be alone with him," Dolian said, pointing his head in Stefan's direction. Andraya started walking toward the doors. Stefan walked beside her, still linked to the Queen's arm, while Dolian kept pace. "I am meeting the army commander, among other things." The Chancellor's eyes swelled. "Among what on earth for?" "It is none of your business, Chancellor," the Queen replied, as a footman opened the doors for them. "None of my business?" Dolian exclaimed. "I have cargo shipped through that port. If something has gone awry, I deserve to know about it." Andraya lifted her skirt as the three of them quickly descended the large front steps of the palace. "Oh, like shipments you have not told me about?" Dolian huffed out a breath. "What are you talking about? What difference does it make whether I ship 10 pounds of oranges or 100 pounds? When the trio reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped onto the cobblestones, Andraya turned to face the Chancellor. "So there are no shipments at all that I would consider atrocious?" Dolian threw his hands in the air. "Like what, lemons?" he cried. Andraya shared a look with the prince. "I do not think he knows. Do you?" "I am not certain," said the prince. "He could just be trying to stall you." "Stall you from what?" Dolian growled. "Tell me what is happening." He marched up to the Queen, stopping inches before her face. Andraya moved to stomp on his foot, but Stefan had already shoved him backward. "How dare you?" Stefan said in a low voice. "Have you no respect at all? If you could hear and see yourself." Dolian's face contorted from anger to confusion to consideration, all in a moment's time. He blew out a hefty breath. He glanced up at the Queen from under his eyelashes. Andraya was surprised to see a little shame on his face. He pursed his lips and scratched his head. "I must go, Chancellor," Andraya announced as a footman opened the carriage door for her. "Please tell me what is going on," Dolian said, a bit of pleading and irritation in his tone. Andraya paused to look at him. "I am arresting the marquis." Dolian's eyes bulged. "Draven?" "Yes, Draven." "What has he done?" For better or worse, Andraya explained all that the marquis had been accused of and the letters she had found. Dolian's countenance grew more astonished with each detail she shared. "This is outlandish. It cannot be so. Which ships does he use?" "I do not know, Chancellor, but I must go." "You cannot go alone," the Chancellor said. "She will not be alone," said Stefan and Hudson together, reminding the Queen once more that Hudson was near. "Right," Dolian grumbled. He glanced at the Queen in a very peculiar way. Then he glared at the Prince with unmistakable jealousy in his eyes. "Draven has always been suspiciously recluse. I will find out all I can about the scallywag." "I appreciate that." She took Stefan's hand as he helped her into the carriage. Dolian watched the Prince as if his every move were strange but interesting. The footman shut the door. Just as the coach whipped the reins, Dolian called, "Your Majesty, wait." He jogged up to the Queen's window. Yes? I wish you good luck." "Thank you, Chancellor." And with that, the carriage wheels started rolling away, just as a new face appeared in the window. It was Lord Martin, with his round cheeks and bulbous eyes and urgent expression. "Stop the carriage, please," he called. The carriage stopped. "Please open the door, my fellow," Martin said to the footman. Not a moment later, the ostentatious gentleman jumped in the carriage. "Excuse me, my lord," said the Queen. "What is the meaning of this?" "Oh, I heard you were embarking on a most important pursuit, and I thought I may be of use. I also have much to discuss with you about what I have found in your finance books." Andraya did not want Martin to be there when Draven was arrested, but she also knew he would find out about it soon enough. Besides, she was a little too intrigued with what he found in her finances to disagree. "Very well, Lord Martin, under one condition." "Anything, my Queen." "When we return, I would like you to help me locate my lady-in-waiting. Her unknown whereabouts is quite peculiar." "Of course, Your Majesty. It would be my greatest honor," Martin said, in his debonair voice with a hand to his chest. "Carry on," the Queen called out the window, and the wheels started rolling again. Stefan looked less than pleased that Lord Martin was with them, but he said nothing and smiled politely at him. Hudson sat still as a statue as usual. "Oh, Your Highness!" Lord Martin exclaimed. "How fortunate of you to make it out of the dungeon! What a gruesome place to be!" He straightened his cravat. "I, my Queen, have never had the misfortune of being in such a position." Stefan stared at him irritably, but the Queen smiled. How humorous that Martin thought that this would somehow raise his standing with her. "I am happy for you," said the Prince sardonically. "Oh, thank you, sir," Martin said with a bow of his head. Then he leaned forward in dramatic earnest. "Your Majesty, I have found that Chancellor Dolian has kept very strict and clear records of all his cargo being shipped in and out. But Marquis Draven, on the other hand, is much less transparent. Whenever he records shipments, he simply writes shipment and then the price. And other times he will write payment, but I have no idea what the payment is for or who it is to. I think he needs to be questioned on these things by his Queen." "Indeed, sir. We are on our way now to meet the army commander to have the Marquis arrested." Martin's eyes widened, and he straightened in his seat. "Is that so, Your Majesty? You would do that simply because of my word?" He put his hand on his chest as if he were greatly honored. Stefan coughed in attempt to cover up his laugh, and Andraya barely stifled her own. "No, sir. I have other reasons and evidence. Although, I do appreciate you letting me know what you have discovered." Martin grinned like a little boy. "Of course, Your Majesty. Anything for you. By the way, have I told you how very enchanting you look today? Well, I dare say you do. You put this glorious rose garden to shame." He peered out the window to stare at the gardens passing by. Andraya looked out as well. It was true they were beautiful, in full bloom, blossoming every array of color. But their sight brought back a most miserable memory with her late husband. "How dare you insult me in front of my steward?" Gordon had spit. "I only reminded you of the letter your brother had written," Andraya said. "You said right in front of him that it was a letter of advice." "And indeed it was, upon your request." "It was a private matter, and you exploited it," he yelled. "I never mentioned any of the letter's content. Indeed, you never let me read it." "That is because business is not the Queen's concern." "It is my concern. This is my kingdom also." "This is my kingdom," he growled, "and I will not have you meddling in my affairs." Then he stalked right up to Andraya's face. "And now my steward believes I am a weak man who needs advice," he sneered in a low voice. "And it is all your fault." Andraya took a step back. "How dare you? You are just too proud to admit you needed help." King Gordon lifted his large hand and smacked it across her face with such force that she fell back into the rose bushes. Immediate pain pierced through her entire body as a million thorns stabbed her arms and legs and sides. She watched the king storm off down the path. Then the next day, he even had the gall to give her a vase of roses from the very patch he had pushed her into. "Andraya?" The queen blinked hard as she came back to the present moment. Prince Stephen sat across from her, looking concerned. Lord Martin, who sat next to him, was fast asleep, snoring softly. "I am sorry. What were you saying?" she asked the prince. "I was only asking why such a beautiful view," he pointed his head to the vast rose garden, "brings such a dejected look to your lovely face." Andraya exhaled slowly, making sure Martin was still snoring before she spoke. "Because it reminds me of things I do not wish to remember." "Such as?" he asked, his gaze soft and curious. "King Gordon had the gardens put in for me." "Ah, I see." He lowered his eyes to the floor. Andraya frowned. She knew that Stephen thought it was because she missed the monstrous man instead of the truth, but she could not tell him that. She turned her gaze out the window again. Stephen leaned forward and took her hands in his. "Is there anything I can do to help with your grief, my queen?" Andraya shifted to look at him. "Just keep being kind," she whispered. Stephen nodded slightly. "Of course." He held her gaze for a long moment. Andraya's breath caught in her throat. Gordon had never looked at her like this, even when they were engaged, before she knew he was cruel. "May I ask what you are thinking?" said the prince. "Yes, but I will not tell you." Stephen laughed once and bowed his head. "What are you thinking?" Andraya asked. Stephen lifted his head and grinned. "How is it fair that I share a secret when you will not?" Andraya smiled and shrugged. "I suppose it is not. You do not have to tell me." Stephen laughed lightly and leaned back in his seat. "Do not worry. I do not think I will be able to hold it in much longer." Andraya looked at him curiously, but Stephen just gave her a mischievous grin. Just then the queen heard calling from outside the carriage. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" "Who on earth?" said the queen, peeking her head outside the window. It was Benjamin riding on a horse. Soon enough he was keeping pace with the carriage. "Good heavens, Benjamin, what is it?" she called out the window. "I have an urgent letter for you," he said, completely out of breath. "Stop the carriage, please," Andraya called. Benjamin halted his horse and jumped off, handing the letter to the queen. Lord Martin jolted awake with a loud snort. "What has happened? Why have we stopped?" Andraya held up a finger as she read the letter, which was written in her nurse's hand. "My dear queen, I know you will never forgive me for this, but I had no choice. That despicable marquis of yours threatened to harm my children if I did not tell him everything I knew about you. So I told him about the late king and how you are friends with Caleen. I am leaving the palace. I knew you would discharge me anyway, but I could not do so without at least warning you. I am afraid for you, my queen, and dear Caleen. With deepest regrets, Nurse Rose." The queen stared at the page as her heart pounded like a jackhammer. The letter started to shake with her trembling hand. "What is it?" Stefan and Martin asked in unison. Andraya looked up to see both their faces creased with concern. She forced a new breath, but it came out shaky. "I am afraid something has happened to Caleen." "What has happened?" Stefan and Martin said in unison again. "I do not know, but something is wrong." "May I see it?" Stefan asked, holding out his hand. Andraya let him take the letter and turned to Benjamin. "Did Nurse Rose tell you anything else?" Benjamin shook his head. "She only told me what she wrote." "How much longer until we meet up with the army commander?" Stefan asked. "We should be nearly there," Andraya replied. "I see the commander with some of his men coming toward us right now," said Benjamin. Andraya glanced out the window. Indeed, there was her small army she had requested in the field, riding their galloping horses, dressed in strapping red, and holding bows and arrows to their sides. The queen turned to the prince. "Perhaps I could send some of them to search for Caleen." Stefan put a hand on her knee. "My queen, I suggest we allow them to help us arrest the marquis first, to get him out of the way. Then we can scour the land for Miss Caleen." Andraya's stomach curdled with anxiety, but she agreed. She told the coach to proceed and waved an arm out the window for the army commander and his men to follow them. The remaining part of the carriage ride seemed to take hours, although it only took minutes, and most of it was done in silence, with only the plodding hooves of the army horses behind them, and Benjamin's mare who clopped alongside the carriage. Once they reached the port's entry, Prince Stefan assisted the queen out of the carriage. She told the commander to only bring his men into view if and when Draven should resist arrest, and if he had more men to assist him than Hudson could handle on his own. Andraya, Stefan, and Martin filed up to Mr. Weston, the same grubby-looking man whom she had met the previous time she had come. They stood at the top of the extensive ramp leading down to the ocean. "I wish to speak with Marquis Draven. Would you mind bringing me to him?" the queen asked. "The Marquis? Well, yes, of course. He don't like to be disturbed when he be working, but of course since you're the queen, we'll disturb him." "Thank you," said Andraya, as if her request was entirely regular. "No need to fetch me, Mr. Weston. I am already here," said a familiar, dark, raspy voice. "Your Majesty," Draven said with a bow, "I recall you telling me you would let me know ahead of time if you ever visited my port again." "And I recall telling you that I would if I could," said Andraya. Draven glowered. "Then to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" he rasped. "You are under arrest, Draven," the queen said, keeping her tone even. Draven barked out a laugh. "And what fictitious reason have you come up with to do this?" "Perhaps seeing a letter from Reuben will jog your memory," Andraya said coldly. Draven's eyes bulged. He waved his hand to a nearby sailor and motioned for him to come near. The sailor whistled, and more than half a dozen men from all directions appeared at the marquis's side. Andraya's heart skidded, but she kept a straight face. Draven's lips split into an oily grin. "I do not believe you will be able to do what you want today, my queen. But we can take your issues with me up with the council and see which one of us wins." Then his grin curved wider and more wicked than Andraya had ever seen. Andraya returned his wicked smile with one of her own. "You are mistaken, your grace. I will take it up with the council while you are imprisoned." "Commander!" she called. At her request, the commander and his men appeared at the top of the ramp. They more than doubled the marquis's men. Draven's face fell. The man next to him picked up a rock. "Commander," said the queen, "let each of your men be ready to shoot an arrow at this group if need be. We shall see who is fastest." The man dropped his rock. "We are outnumbered," he said to Draven. "I see that," Draven growled. "Commander, arrest this man," said the queen. Draven's men moved in front of him, and the commander's army put up their arrows. They backed away. Just then Andraya spotted a familiar face among the group. "Lord Lucas, what are you doing here?" "Minding my own business," he replied. "I find that difficult to believe." Lucas smirked. Then he said something to Draven which Andraya could not make out, but she thought she heard him mention Dolian. Draven did not respond as the commander tied up his hands. Instead, he spoke to the queen. "I suppose you think you are clever, my queen, but not so clever as to protect your little pet of a friend. Good luck finding her. Sandrian is a big place." A shock shot up Andraya's spine. "What have you done with Caleen?" she whispered fiercely. Draven's oily smile returned. "I only sent her where she belongs. How could I have done anything else? As you can see, my hands are tied." And that concludes Chapter 26. I hope you are enjoying Queen Andraya, and I hope you come back next Thursday for Chapter 27. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.